For the moment, that is what our MEPs think. But what about you? While we've been in Brussels, our political editor John Hess has been sampling a few local delicacies and finding out if there are any connections with the folks back home.
I'm in the Grand Place in the heart of the Belgian capital of Brussels, and like us, it's celebrated for its lace, for its craft beers and for its chocolates. But what else has it got that we haven't got? Now, where's that chocolate shop? Utopia does a fine line in chocolate too, but they're made at the company shop in Nottingham. There's a definite Belgian influence here. They find being able to source supplies and packaging within the EU is a useful spin-off from the European Union.
It makes it easier to buy things in Europe. Certainly it seems like there's more complications if you're to buy anything from outside the European Union. And I guess it's just simpler in terms of sort of tax returns, things like that.
In Brussels, they fancy themselves at making some really knockout beer. But, you know, with places like the Beaver Brewery at Melton Mowbray in Leicestershire, well, we can match them all the way. Traditional English ales, yet the brewery was built with 40% of funding from Europe. Despite that cash help, the talk here is whether there's a financial case for staying in or pulling out.
We need value for money, more than anything from those MPs. We need value for money. And, you know, a clear strategy of where we're going. We either join them full on or we don't. My personal view is that we join them. But if we're not going to, then let's step straight out.
There's lamb on the menu here, and the likelihood is that it's British, one of the many exports from the East Midlands into the EU, last year valued at £1,000 million. For our farmers, of course, the EU is always on the menu. In Derbyshire, at the Bakewell cattle market, they're torn, aware that the EU, with its agricultural subsidies, is very pro-market, but frustrated by red tape and wondering if it would be better if we left.
I think the worst thing that ever happened was when we went to the common market. We should be self-efficient. We should be self-efficient. We shouldn't be in this situation now, ruled by what they're doing and everything. We should be of our own, shouldn't we?
On our perspective, farmers' perspective, if we stayed in the European Union, we'd carry on with probably better subsidies, but if we came out of the euro, we won't have as much red tape and like this EID system for the lambs and things like that. A lot of it's pushed through from Europe, and we're the biggest sheep industry in Europe. We should be like saying what goes off.
I'm not sure as Britain as a whole would be better off staying in. I believe we'd be better off out. But from my own personal view, from making a living from sheep trade as a sheep producer, we are definitely better in.
Act, react, impact is a slogan we're going to hear an awful lot of over the next few months as the European Parliament and the EU explain to us voters what these elections are all about.
I think it'd be nice if they did tell us more about what the benefits are, because we don't know any different. Everyone's got about the in-out referendum, but I don't think anybody actually knows the full detail.
I can name parliamentary MPs, but no, I never see them, because the constituency is too big.
Places like this can appear to be a long way from home at times, but with Europe going up the political agenda, many voters may have an appetite for more information about Europe and whether to embrace the EU or whether it's time to ask for the bill and to check out for good.
Well, some really interesting views there, and what seems to come across is that people aren't necessarily hostile to Europe. A lot are torn between their heart and their wallets, and among those farmers there was a reluctant agreement that they're better off in. The chocolatiers like being able to buy from Europe easily because of the single market, and the brewery got a European grant for its building. So there's some very powerful arguments there for being in favour.
Well, every pound we get in European grant funding costs the British economy about £3, so we'd do better to keep the money at home. I'm very concerned about this idea that we wouldn't be able to trade if we left. The other point that I want to make is about farmers, though. Everybody, I think, agrees that in today's world, British farmers need a subsidy regime. Our point is quite simple, that British farmers would be better off with a British subsidy regime designed in Britain rather than with a subsidy regime designed in Brussels for French farmers.
OK, but did you hear what those farmers said in Derbyshire? They recognised that there was a financial need to be in the union. Whether they personally felt they didn't want to be in it, financially they felt they had to be.
But they were making the assumption that in the EU they get their CAP payments, and if we leave, that's the end of farm subsidies. Of course, my job is to reassure them. Nobody is suggesting that outside the EU we would scrap farm subsidies. We would just have better focused ones and less regulation, which was the other thing they asked for.
OK. You were sceptical about this, Emma?
Well, really, when we joined the European Union, it's for a common market. It was for the benefits of the trade, as we were discussing, and the single market is a substantial contributor to the UK economy. So that's not in question. What is in question is the level of interference that we're having, the bureaucracy that we've got, the red tape, and that's why we've been working hard as Conservative MEPs in cutting that red tape and making sure people are actually working towards building an economy that's going to really spur on growth and jobs.
But there's no getting away from it, Glenys. So there were a lot of sceptics in that film, weren't there? You know, people are just not sure.
Yes, I think partly because we don't get the message across well enough. And, you know,
Why?
when Emma talks about red tape, what the Conservatives are talking about are cutting rights at work, rights for part-time workers, rights for maternity and paternity provision that have come from this Parliament. And you know what is always said about the cost? I heard Roger talking about the cost. The CBI did a survey, and each family is £3,000 a year better off.
There is this problem, isn't there, of getting your message across to people. It's about information. They don't really know who you are. Why is that? I mean, some of you around this table have been in Parliament in Europe for so long.
4-something million
Bill.
people.
Well, we have to represent 3.5 million people in the East Midlands, from Glossop to Skegness down to the bottom of Northamptonshire. It's physically impossible.
Is that the problem then?
Yes,
constituencies are just too big.
And the cost of postage on a second-class stamp is 50p, so we can't send 2 million letters out to the people either. It's physically impossible to reach all these people. We don't get on national TV. It's very difficult.
Oh, this sounds
and the responsibility.
like you're blaming us.
No. The last thing is the people who get the national media attention and are therefore capable of informing people about Europe are the national party leaders at Westminster. And ever since the beginning, no party leader at Westminster has ever talked about Europe in favourable terms. That's our difficulty, putting the real facts across.
It would really help, though, if people in the East Midlands knew what it is you're doing for them, wouldn't it? Isn't that what you need to change, that message?
Can I give an example of something I've been doing? I've got to vote in a couple of weeks' time on clinical trials. That means we'll have medical research made easier and quicker. That brings new medicines to people in the East Midlands. I did that because I met cancer patients at the Nottingham hospital, and that will be better for all those patients suffering from those diseases. That is something we have done here. That's something practical.
Perhaps I can give an example too, just to illustrate to Bill that I do something useful from time to time. This very morning, I was arguing in a meeting that was taking place with the Commission that they should be reducing green energy subsidies, and that would have the effect of reducing energy prices, or at least preventing them going up so quickly.
I, for example, have brought into place, through working on the Professional Qualifications Directive here in the Parliament, an alert mechanism, so we will know if healthcare professionals or doctors working in this country have been struck off in another country, that there will be an alert set out to all countries in the EU, and to also allow us to language test our healthcare professionals to make sure they can speak English. That is something concrete that will change people's lives.
But even think for consumers, Maury, like mobile roaming charges, you know, they're going to be absolutely got rid of.
I know we hear a lot of that, but it's not really going to set the world alight,
it isn't, but it's practical things that people care about. And things like if you're bumped off your aircraft or your flight is cancelled, how you can actually make a claim for those sort of things.
Added bureaucracy,
as I say, it's hardly going to get us to the barricades, though, is it, Glenys? Be fair.
It isn't, but it's things that people don't know about. They don't know this comes from Europe. They think it's national legislation. And the point I'm making is we have to tell them this is European legislation.
If I can respond to your...
Yes, Bill.
Glenys made a very good point. The national ministers come back from Brussels and claim all the credit. Stand up in the House of Commons and say, I did this, I did that. They don't actually say it's the European Parliament, the MEPs who did it.
So we're having another debate about Europe, another debate about whether we should be in or out. Isn't it time that we gave voters, once and for all, clear up this indecision and give them the chance?
Well, I think you have to decide whether you think it's in Britain's interest. As a politician, that's what they expect to do. They expect you to take a lead. We think it's massively in Britain's interest to be part of the EU.
But people are getting fed up with not knowing what to do.
If there is, we've been quite clear. There will be an out referendum if there is any move of powers back to Brussels from the UK, there will be an in-out referendum. That is our position. That's a sensible position to take, because the uncertainty...
Isn't that bound to happen? That's
well,
Keith's point,
no, it wasn't.
It?
The uncertainty that the Conservatives are causing at the moment is for investment in our country. Businesses tell me all the time they don't know whether to invest in Britain because they don't know whether we're going to be out in a couple of years' time or not. And we have to give that stability. So we've said, yes, we are in, and we will have an in-out referendum if there are powers that are moved to Brussels.
Maybe later on. That gives stability. We need to have the referendum now.
Why do we have to wait till 2017, Emma?
Well, the reason why we can't have a referendum now is we need to get legislation through the House of Commons in order to have a referendum, and these two parties, the Labour and Liberal Democrats, won't let that happen. So the reality is that if we are going to have a new relationship with the EU going forward, it needs to be the British people that make that decision. We need to have a referendum. We need to have a plan in place. UKIP have absolutely no plan for the future. We do as British Conservatives, and we trust the British people, which Labour and the Lib Dems don't, to make that decision.
You don't have a plan, Emma, because you don't have a plan because we don't know what is going to be negotiated. We don't know what it's going to look like and what we're going to vote on.
But we don't know whether David Cameron will be there to do it.
Perhaps you don't read the Telegraph. It was very clearly outlined.
It is not clearly outlined. There is no plan at all because nobody knows.
It was outlined, but it was not ambitious.
If you ask David Cameron, will he say yes or no? He doesn't know because he doesn't know what he's going to come out with.
Well, last I heard him saying was that he would fight tooth and nail to stay in, regardless of what the renegotiations said.
He does want to stay in because he knows it's in Britain's interest to stay in.
In 1975, we had a referendum. When the campaign started, the public were 2-1 against because they knew nothing about how it worked.
Absolutely,
After 4 weeks campaigning, the public voted 2-1 in favour of staying in.
Because all the media were
just
on
for a moment,
on the
Roger, with respect.
Stay inside.
For 4 weeks, we'll have all the facts put forward. I'm very confident the public will vote yes to stay in.
Well, we'll have to leave it there.